We want to introduce Timothee Sallin. He is the last speaker, but not necessarily, we didn't pick them in the order that they were the best or thing. All the speakers, I think, are very good. But he's going to give us a very important message on how we can develop our lands. Like there's coming up in Vero Beach, or in Sebastian now, there's a large annexation going on there, and there's a debate on how to do it right. How can we do it best for our environment? And so I think Timothee will help us with that. He's been working on that. He is the co-CEO of IMG Enterprises, a diversified family-owned Florida ag business. It is the parent company for Cherrylake Nursery, which he has been very, very generous in giving us native plants, trees, that we've distributed free to different people in the community that have requested them. His nursery, I'm sure, is the largest. It's one of the largest anyway in Florida. It's huge, miles and miles and miles of native plants, and it's really quite impressive to drive up there and see his nursery.
In Groveland, Lake County.
He is passionate about promoting and sustainable agriculture and sustaining landscape practices in Florida, as well as innovation in agricultural technology and organizational leadership. He's a board member of 1,000 Friends of Florida, a nonprofit organization which some of you probably even donate to saving and building better communities. He gives examples on how we must have our future developments like the ones being discussed in Sebastian and in our counties. Is there anyone here from the Sebastian City Council? I was going to have him clap for him for showing up, because these are the people that we really need to get educated in how to develop our remaining agricultural lands and how we do it so that we have a successful, viable planet. So right now, I'd like to introduce Timothee Sallin. I appreciate so very much that you came down to give us a talk. And let's have a round of applause for him.
Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you to all of you for being here. I know it's been a long day. I appreciate everybody sticking with it and learning about native plants, sustainable landscapes. And so I promise I'm going to go through my slides very quickly. And I don't want to linger on too much of the detail in here because I want to just kind of paint a broad picture of what is currently being done and what more we can do to mainstream sustainable landscapes in Florida by working with the local governments and with the land developers and our universities and industries to take what we are talking about today and do it at a large scale for new construction and development. If we're going to have new construction and development, how can we imagine it so that it would be less harmful to our environment and perhaps start to reverse some of these ecological trends and patterns that have been discussed? So that's kind of the topic of my talk. We are a family business. We actually have a business here in Vero Beach. Cherrylake is one of our businesses, and the other business is called IMG Citrus. We have a packing house here, and we farm 15,000 acres of land in Florida, including a lot of land on the Treasure Coast. So we have an interest not just in sustainable landscaping as it applies to land that is developed in the residential and commercial space, but the agricultural lands and how we're farming and how we can farm our lands more sustainably. But that's maybe for a different time. So I'm going to talk a lot about the Outside Sustainable Landscape Collaborative, or the Outside CoLab. This is an organization that's bringing together the stakeholders from across the state to include the private industry, the growers, the landscapers, the landscape architects, the local governments, the water management districts, the research organizations, basically anybody who has a stake in how we develop our lands and landscapes and who are interested in promoting sustainable landscapes. What we're trying to do is to increase the adoption of sustainable landscapes in Florida. That's our big goal. And so we've set it out where we've identified 10 sub-goals. How are we going to do this? How are we going to boil the ocean or eat this elephant? Well, we're going to do it one step at a time, one attainable goal at a time. So these are our 10 goals. I'm going to come through and talk about them as we go through. The first one is to build collaboration. We need to get the right people in the room together and put this topic on the table. And so, I'm very grateful that you're here. In particular, I'm very grateful that Commissioner Moss is here and others who can take this out into the community and broaden the collaboration. You may not be a member of the Outside Collab, but if you're here, in a sense, you are. Because that's the only criteria for membership, is that you care about this goal of promoting sustainable landscapes in Florida. So we have the 10 goals. I'm not going to read them, but they might come up again and you could read them for yourselves. When crafting goals, we like to try to align our goals to higher order goals. And so, in a sense, the highest order goals that are out there are the global development goals, the UN sustainability goals. There's 17 of them, and there's a lot of places where we intersect: climate action, life below water, life on land, sustainable cities and communities, clean water and sanitation. In fact, many of these goals are going to be impacted by what we do in Florida with our lands and with our landscaping. So the big trends, you've heard all about it today, so I'm just going to breeze through here. The population in Florida is growing. It's going to grow something like 34 million by 2070. The people are coming. So what are we going to do? If we develop the way that we have been historically developing, we're going to end up with a Florida on the right, where the red is the paved over and developed lands. But if we follow alternative best practices in planning and land development, on zoning and conservation, we can maybe accommodate the 34 million people with something that's more like the alternative, where you have a lot more land and conservation, you have a lot more compact and dense development, and so you're able to preserve lands. So this is kind of a general big picture. We have people moving to Florida, but there's also an ecological rationale, and we know about the biodiversity loss, and we know that we're kind of at a turning point in history where if we change to best practices, we can maybe reverse the curve, and if we continue to do things poorly, then it might get worse. Anyhow, biodiversity is important globally. It's very important in Florida. Florida is a global biodiversity hotspot because of our climate, because of our natural resources. There is more life diversity in Florida than many other parts of the world. And we know that the food web is based on the insects and the plants and so forth. You've heard all about this today, so let's not belabor the point. The goal is to increase the adoption of sustainable landscapes in Florida, and we're working towards that. So the question is, what is a sustainable landscape in the first place? Is that a sustainable landscape? It's beautiful. It's got a bunch of native plants. I like it. What about that? Also, it's all native plants. I think it's beautiful. There's a meandering path through it. We'll talk more about that later, but you know what? I don't know. So what we want to do is try to come up with quantifiable outcomes, a definition of sustainable landscapes that can be verified through research. Because if we are able to quantify, then we can demonstrate to Commissioner Moss and we can demonstrate to the large land developers and others what the economic and environmental rationale is. So we worked with the University of Florida and others, and we kind of came up with these 4 basic concepts. Minimize, eliminate irrigation beyond establishment. Minimize, eliminate mineral fertilizer use. Minimize, eliminate pesticides, and promote maximum ecological diversity. So all these things can be quantifiably measured. So that's where we're really, one of the places we're starting. I think that in order to convince people to change, you have to bring them evidence that is going to help them make a good decision. And we're very fortunate that there's ways to do this. We're focusing on living laboratories, which is basically taking the research and putting it in places where people can interact with it. So instead of doing plots and university land, we've been working with communities and with Sunbridge and Tavistock, which is a developer I'll be speaking about shortly, to do this in places where people will interact and see it. So we recently, I think it's been about 18 months ago, planted this boundary planting at base camp. And I'm going to talk a little about the design of this garden and what it's for and where it is. So where is base camp? Base camp is in Sunbridge. And Sunbridge is a new master plan community that is being developed in Osceola and Orange County on portions of the Deseret Ranch. The land developer who is going to be leading this development project for the next 20 or 30 years is a developer named Tavistock. Tavistock, they developed Lake Nona in Florida, and the owner of Tavistock is also the owner of Arsenal Football Club in England. So anyways, it's a very big project. There's Lake Nona, this is Central Florida. There's actually the potential for 3 more Sunbridge-sized projects to be developed in the future on the Deseret Ranch. So I'm not here to talk about whether or not we should allow development or not allow development. That's not where my journey begins. My journey begins at the point of contact that we have permitted projects that are going to be built. How can we make them better? So Sunbridge is 24,000 acres. It will have a total of 36,000 potential residential units, 20,000 commercial, industrial, retail square footage. It's huge. It's huge, but if it's done correctly, the impacts can be significant. More importantly, if it's done correctly, it can become an example. It can become a benchmark that'll help inspire other developers, other communities to go down this path. You know, it's hard to be the first one, but when you have a large-scale, serious development project that is successful implementing sustainable landscapes, it could be a very exciting opportunity. And that's really what we see happening. So back to Base Camp. Base Camp is the sales center, welcome center, and basically community hub for Sunbridge. They're just starting to do this project, so there's not a lot of homes yet. They have been doing it for about 2 years. Right across from Base Camp, they have a Del Webb community. You guys have a Del Webb community? Okay, you know what that looks like. And it's the Del Webb landscaping, the St. Augustine, the Trinettes, the Laura Petalums, the Viburnums, right? Anyways, these are the gardens. There are about 15,000 square feet of gardens, and you can see there's this meandering mulch path that goes through, and it's split up into, I think, 12 experimental plots. So it was an experimental design that was set up with the different researchers, but we also tried to make it as a garden that people could learn about plants, walk through the garden, even if they weren't aware of the research. Hence the mulch path and the location being kind of in the community hub. So we did a couple different treatments, irrigation as needed, irrigation on regular schedule. We did a compost, no compost comparison. And we built this garden with 27 species of native plants, trees, shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers that were selected because they already grow around this project in the existing ecoregion that is these pine flatwoods around Osceola County. So we picked the plants and then we designed the plots. So all the plots have the exact same number of plants, the same mix of species, and they're designed as kind of an English garden. And so then we built it, and these are some pictures of what it looks like. I find it to be beautiful myself, but that's also a matter of taste. That's bee balm, which is beautiful. So then we invited the researchers to come in and do their research in the community. So this is why we call it a living laboratory. It's research happening in the community. And the first project I want to talk to you about is being done by Brooke Mulfus, who's a PhD student at the University of Florida. And she's focusing on urban soils. So, you know, we wanted to see what happens if you do with compost or without compost, and would that make a difference? So she was looking at plant survivorship and pest herbivory and this kind of stuff. And it was very interesting because she used a visual scale to say, okay, I'm going to look at these plants every other week, and I'm going to rate them on a visual scale, and then I'm going to see how it compares. And she's coming up with some interesting data. So you have compost in red, no compost in blue. When it was planted in spring, they both scored pretty high. But in summer, you know, no compost was dipping, and by fall, both were dipping, but compost not as much. So in the first year, it seemed pretty clear that the compost was having an effect in this garden. For what that's worth, they're using drones and aerial technology to measure kind of growth rate and DVI and like color and things like that. So they're using science, which is great. And they're coming up with information that might be useful. It's still early on. So this project just started. The fact is that it's happening, it's funded, and we'll see what happens. The next project in the same garden is by UCF. And UCF is looking at pollinators and other insects. And so, you know, we love pollinators, the fuzzy ones, the colorful ones. And then, of course, the ones that really do all the work, and then, the other ones. And so there's all kinds of pollinators, and they're all visiting this garden. Now, mind you, this is right next to Del Webb. It's in Orlando. I mean, it's still somewhat undeveloped, so there are some nice natural resources around. But coming into the garden, they calculated in June 17 species of bees, 15 species of wasps, blah, blah, blah. So it's just research that shows that these plants attract pollinators, and so if we're interested in pollinators, okay. That's interesting. The compost doubled the number of flowers. And when you have double the number of flowers, you get double the number of pollinators. So that was kind of an interesting finding. Really interesting is that they show like a pollinator pollinator species, flower species by pollinator species. And so different species of pollinators are visiting different species of plants. And we kind of already know that. But what's really interesting is that there's like a super plant. And that I didn't know. In the 27 plants, there's an outlier. That is the rattlesnake master. I can't pronounce it. Erginium eucifolium. Rattlesnake master is a pretty cool looking plant. Well, look at how more effective it is at attracting pollinators. 120 versus the next best one was like 50. And everybody's clustered over here around 15. So if you take something home from my presentation, maybe it's that you'll plant a rattlesnake master in your garden. So that's one living laboratory, the base camp research plots. Now, again, sticking with Sunbridge, because we have a very willing partner here, we have another living laboratory, which are the model homes. The model homes in the first community that the developer is building. So I did mention that there was a Del Webb. They just sold that to Pulte, and Pulte built Del Webb. The rest of this, or much of the rest of this, Tavistock themselves will be the developers, and they will have control over the architecture and the building and the codes. And so this is their first community that they're developing within Sunbridge, one of many, many to come. I think it's like, on the right is the plan. I think it's like 200 homes. And this is the model center area. So these are all like model homes. And they came to us after we did a conference like this, and they said, you know what, this is great. Why don't you guys help us design some sustainable landscapes for the model homes, and we'll build them, and let's see how it goes. Okay? Like, just go ahead and do it? Yeah, go ahead and do it. So we collaborated with a couple landscape architecture firms. We collaborated with Mark Gotts from Green Isle Gardens Nursery, Cherrylake, and so the universities, and we said, okay, let's get a little group together, and we were in a rush, because, builders and developers, everything is last minute, it seems. So they told us this in October, and the homes were going to be built in January. And so, we said we thought we could do it, but we never actually sat down and tried. And the homes were really big, and the lots were really small. No surprise. So that was interesting, because we did not set out to design a no-turf landscape, but when we looked at what we were dealing with, it just made sense, because where are you going to put the turf? I mean, there's just no room for it anyways. And you're not going to go throw a Frisbee or kick a soccer ball around, because these lots are too small anyways. And there's a nice park right across the street. You might have noticed from the plan. So we said, okay, well, fine, let's do no turf, which is no mow, and it's also quiet, and it's nice. So we tried to do that. And so it's mostly native. It's not all natives. And we designed them, and then we said, please, please, please let us install them, because, we don't want to lose control of this project when you just turn it over to production builders and their landscapers, who have built, 500 homes the past 6 months exactly the same way with the same plant palette. And now you give them this piece of paper and you tell them to do a 180, and they're not going to slow down because they don't have time to slow down. But that didn't happen, so we went to the builders, and I'm talking a real, like, fast-moving, large-scale construction project like this. And they installed these 12 homes with the designs that we provided them, and they did a pretty good job. We had to go back and clean up a little bit after them, but they actually, they did a real effort, an authentic effort to do it, and they kind of pulled it off. So these are some pictures. So the homes, there's blueberries and blanket flowers, and there's spiderwort, and there's like all kinds of cool stuff. But we are trying to narrow the plant list down to plants that are going to be hardy, they're going to be maybe easier to maintain in this environment. So there's thousands of really amazing Florida native plants, as you all know. But we're trying to focus on the ones that are going to be hardy and reliable. So anyways, It's not perfect. We're learning a lot. This is cool. That's swamp twin flower in between the buildings where nothing grows. Swamp twin flower loves it. Shady, moist, handles the runoff. Really cool. So, you know, we've got opportunities to now show this is how you use a specific plant in a specific context. And we got opportunities to learn what's not working because we were making tons of mistakes, which is awesome. Because we really never had the opportunity to do this before. So we never had the opportunity to fail. So, and of course, you know, it's still a construction project. This tree, I think it was either the hurricanes or maybe somebody turned off the irrigation. Stuff like that happens. The problem actually out there is that people keep turning up the irrigation, which is really annoying. So then we helped them with this sidewalk to curb because we did the model homes and the sidewalk to curb was St. Augustine. And we're like, oh, and the homeowner had to maintain it. And we're like, oh, we just built this no-mow, like no-turf landscape. They don't even have to own a mower. And it's going to be peaceful and quiet, but no, they have to go mow this little strip 42 times a year, right? So we said, please let us do something about that. So they said, okay, this is a really cool developer to work with. And we got the money from the Toho Water Authority, which is the utility district, to fund this little research. So we stripped out the St. Augustine on 11 lots, and we put in perennial peanut, frog fruit, and mimosa, and then we're doing mixes. And let's see, you know, I don't know how well they're going to do. It's a tough environment to establish these types of plants. But we're learning and we're trialing. But now we're going to do the research because the Nature Conservancy has funded UF to do a 2-year project with these model homes to quantify the impacts that we were talking about earlier, pesticides, fertilizer, water use, or even quantifying labor. So that way we can say, how do these landscapes affect the amount of inputs that have to go into the landscape? Is it really different? Because that's interesting to us, and we have a control group because we're using 12 homes across the street at Del Webb. So I'm going to get the water bill for Del Webb, Model Home 1, and I'm going to get the water bill for Wesleyan Park, Sunbridge Model Home 1, and I'm going to compare how many gallons of water per day on a per acre basis. We'll have more findings in a year, but the great news is that it's funded, it's set up, it's underway, and this is information we've never really had before. And it's the kind of information you need if you're going to convince Sunbridge or Osceola County or the Toho Water Authority or the Indian River County Commission to go out there and do something that's politically risky. So we've got to give these people the tools that they need to be successful. So back to Sunbridge. So Sunbridge, if you develop the whole thing, right, so assuming 29,000 homes, if people were just using UF-IPIS recommendations for conventional landscapes, and usually they overwater and overfertilize, but let's just say they use that. Well, these are the numbers that you're talking about, and nitrogen and phosphorus and water and CO2. So you're talking about 14 million gallons a day. That's bigger than the Gainesville consumptive use permit. So what if we could reduce these numbers by 10%, 15%, 30%? What will be convincing? And I think it's going to be 30% or more. Now we're talking about, kind of regional scale, utility scale impacts. And it's not just Sunbridge. I mentioned that there could be 3 Sunbridge on the Deseret Ranch one day. This is Deering Park. We're working with this developer. They are next in line. They see what we're doing at Sunbridge. They want to be a part of it. The developer did Babcock Ranch. Good development. Lots of great press about it after Ian. One of the leadership members, this is a big company, this is an old family company. I think they made their money in the 1800s, International Harvester, right? And they have a lot of land in Florida. This is 70,000 acres. So what you're looking at is Edgewater to Titusville. The good news is that already 28,000 acres are in a mitigation bank. Another 30,000 acres are going to go into some form of conservation, and they are going to develop 30,000. All right, so 70,000 acres of land, 30,000 acres of development. That's a lot. That's like Sunbridge. And the first phase is Deering Park North. This is where we're going to get started next. So in other words, if we work with large master plan community developers who are willing to take take a step to embrace this. And why do they want to embrace it? I can't read their minds, but it could be because they know they're not going to have enough water to finish out their project if they continue utilizing water at the rate that they're using it, right? Because they have to think 20, 30 years down the road. That's the scale that they're operating at. And anybody thinking about water in Florida 20 or 30 years down the road does the math and finds out the truth. Water's going to run out. So that might be the reason. But one of the reasons might be that it's trendy and that this is what the consumers want. And one of the reasons might be that it's just the right thing to do and that the kind of people they are. I don't know. I really don't care, to be honest. If they're going to do it, that's great. So we have our goals, right? And I talked about the research a lot because quantifying the impacts, I think, is how you kind of get to the decision makers. You know, whether it's the purse string holders, the people who are going to be investing in development, or whether it's the political, the political community who have to make decisions about our land use, our zoning, our land development codes. But we have other goals, and one of the goals is to look at how do we codify the design of these landscapes? And so that'll help people like other developers implement these landscapes that we've done at Sunbridge on the model homes. They could take a document and they can apply it to their project. Or maybe a municipality can take a document and start to apply it to developing a new landscape code. So we have this form-based code that was developed. All of this is volunteer work, and it's not my company. It's all the people that I've been talking about who have come collaboratively. And it's all open source. So volunteer work by very professional landscape architects put this together. It's like a 40-page document. I just have some snaps, you know, some of the lots, sizes, and it really gets into how you design, right? Because there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. We need to know how to design, obviously, in order to have a chance. So in this pattern book comes a native plant list, and one of our goals is to expand that, because a native plant list needs to be really done at the eco-region level, or it needs to be done at some kind of regional level. So I think maybe in the state of Florida we can identify 6 or 8 regions and work with the experts in our industries to recommend what are these resilient, hardy, proven native plants that we can use in commercial scale and put them in plant lists that then are available to developers, because the developers, they do landscape standards for their communities that become kind of like ordinances of their own. But also the municipalities who have their ordinances, they need good plant lists. So, that's one of the areas we're trying to work on. And what that does, when you have plant lists, it helps to build the market, which is goal number 2, right? Because we have to simultaneously increase demand and supply. You can't increase demand and not supply, and you can't increase supply and not demand. This is the hard part of the problem. So the plant list helped that, because when I say now there's 30,000 acres that is committed to these 100 plants, there's a market that's predictable. It's a 30-year market, but a grower only needs like a 3-year market to make a decision. If Indian River County updates their landscape code and they have a good plant list that was supported by the industry and the local members, and it has 100 plants that are either favored or recommended or encouraged, may, should, shall, who knows. That creates a market. So then we try to, encourage that, and we're growing more, and we're trying to promote it more, and it's naturally happening. But we have to coordinate. This is tricky. Another goal is to grow industry competencies in sustainable landscape maintenance. We could do everything right. You can design it, you can grow the plant, you could build it, you could research it to depth, and if it's not maintained, guess what? It reverts back to the other thing, because now you have this landscaper who comes in who's used to mow, blowing, and going, and he's used to St. Augustine and Trinets and viburnums, and he comes in, doesn't know what it is, looks like a weed, and then he just, and you kill it. So probably this is one of the most critical goals, is to build real industry-scale competency for sustainable landscape maintenance. It's not mow, blow, and go anymore, because there's really no grass to mow, blow, and go. Maintenance company, about 80% of it is labor, and of the labor, about 75% is dedicated to mowing, edging, string trimming, and blowing. It's all related to the turf. You take that away, there's like 35% of the time, maybe, that's done for detailing and trimming and stuff like that. So they trim everything the same, because they don't have time, and they have these tools that are, So we have to change that, but need a little bit more plant knowledge. So we're working on a video series, and it's basically 2 to 3 minute videos that address a very specific task, down to this is how you prune a Stokes aster. Use this pair of clippers. We're going to identify the node. We're going to cut back here, clip, clip, clip. You want to do this, after it's pruned or spent, leave the basal stem, walk away. And we'll do that for a number of perennials. We'll talk about grass cutbacks. We'll talk about mowing coreopsis. We'll talk about using compost, or just different topics, right? And we're building the library as we go. So we may have 50 videos now, and we hope to have more. So some are kind of pro series, so oriented towards how would you teach a landscaper who's been mowing on a mowing crew for 5 years, how would you start to train him to be able to do this? And some are oriented towards homeowners. So maybe the homeowner wants to do it themselves. In fact, Sunbridge has asked us, hey, you got to give us some homeowner material because we need to explain to people what they're moving into. By the way, the 12 model homes, they liked it. They put it into their community landscape standards. It's now an official requirement of all of the builders by contract. If they want to build in Sunbridge, they have to follow those standards. They have to use plants from that plant list. So that's a path we're getting it done, but we're almost scared of our success, because if that happens, who's going to maintain them? Who's going to go to the plants, right? So I'm always a little bit in a rush, because we know we can get traction with the developers at scale. And I think we're going to get traction with the local governments, which is goal number 4, supporting local governments to evaluate landscape codes for effectiveness. Local government officials are not landscape code specialists. How could they possibly be? And it's very tricky to write a landscape code, so we need to support them. We were asked by Seminole County. They attended our collab last October. One of the commissioners, Amy Lockhart, she said, this is great. Would you mind doing a symposium for the county? I was like, oh, I'd love to. And she's a go-getter and a hustler, and I thought this would die on the vine. She calls me back 1 week later. She's like, would you mind setting a date with my staff? I'm going to ask all of the elected officials in the county and all of the municipalities and all of the staff to attend. Brilliant. So we're doing that. We're working with Lake County, where our farm is, because they're doing a JPA, which is a joint planning agreement. There's 14 municipalities in Lake County, and it gets a little messy. Everybody's got their own codes, and so they wanted to create some harmony, and there's really good traction, and they're going to do a JPA, which addresses a lot of things kind of collectively. And one of the things they want to put in the JPA is an updated sustainable landscape code. So we'll be supporting them with that. We'd be thrilled to support Indian River County and any other county, because what we can do through the collaborative is simply bring experts from those counties and areas, support those experts with people that are in our collab, and just figure out what the right collection of people is to have maximal impact at that particular point of contact. So that's goal number 4. There's all these goals, and I don't think we're going to achieve them overnight. This is a massive project. It's a project that's been going on for decades, and it's a project that has been moved forwards by many of you, all of our speakers, and generations of Floridians who have been passionate, from the Florida Native Plant Society to FAN, to FNGLA and its members, and also, just passionate people. So it's a big project. We have to have a long-term goal and kind of carve it up into smaller, attainable goals that we can pursue, and to do that with optimism, to do it with the courage and the optimism that we can, in fact, start to make a difference. Because when you look at landscapes and ecology, you start thinking in terms of systems. And what's great about thinking in terms of systems is that as you try to think of solutions, you think in terms of systems, and if you can just find the right catalyst, if you could just find the right driver in an ecological process and apply leverage there, then you might create a chain reaction. And so I think that we can do this. And I think that because things have gotten so bad, we actually have an opportunity. Because there's greater awareness and there's greater concern, and you can no longer ignore the issue, either politically or ethically. And we have more supporters, and there's funds flowing. Indian River just passed the ballot initiative. So did Brevard County, so did Alachua County, so did Nassau County. 5 counties this last election cycle funded conservation. And they passed something like 80%. Marijuana didn't pass by 61%. So there, you know, people show up at the ballot and it says conservation, they're going to say yes. They're going to say yes. Just get it on the ballot. So anyways, I hope that paints a picture of where maybe we can go in working with the development community and working with local government to try to promote the adoption of sustainable landscapes at scale. And my closing remark is that everything that I talked about today has been the fruits of tremendous volunteer and spontaneous organization and collaboration that is just bubbling up. And there's no need to limit the amount of collaboration. So anyone who wants to be involved in things like the ones I've been talking about, check out the outsidecolab.com. We do events, we have the YouTube channel, we have the video series, the pattern book, you know, resources you can access right away. And you know, just touch base, you know, email me or other members of the collab. Let us know, you know, what we can do differently or more, what can do in your community, what can you help to organize at a grassroots level. You know, the grassroots level is Richard and the Pelican Audubon Society. You guys are amazing. I mean, really, I mean amazing, because to distribute 14,000 trees, I was telling Richard, is really, really hard. It's not easy. It's easy enough to get trees from nurseries. The hard part is finding homes for them and motivating the community to plant them and take care of them. So that was wonderful. The fact that you guys did the landscaping at the BOCC offices was brilliant and wonderful. And I'm really impressed by the energy in this community. So if the Outside Collab can bring value to your efforts, or if you can bring value to our efforts, then I think, you know, we'd be so happy to collaborate and do that. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
That's a terrific job. You said exactly what I was hoping that you would cover, and appreciate it. We got time for a question. Yes.
I'm curious if you've done any work with Habitat for Humanity. That's a community that a lot of the people who are, you know, don't have as much money are also not included in this kind of project, and yet they could benefit even more from the savings and the diversity and all that.
That's a great point. We've done a number of habitat houses in the past, but not bringing the sustainable landscapes to those projects. So if we have another opportunity, I certainly would want to encourage that they do that.
Great. Yes.
Do you check the pH of the soil or group any of your trees?
Yeah, so, you know, when we did the research plots, we checked the pH, and the pH ranged from 8.4 to 4.9. we were a little concerned. The compost helps buffer the pH, but yeah, we check. The problem is these site development soils, a lot of times, you know, they're really poor.
Go ahead.
When you did your Sunbridge project on the model homes and you had your 12, I guess you said it was 12 homes where you did the landscape design, so did you totally modify that soil with the composting material, or?
Yes, so we put a compost in all of the planting areas. Again, it's a fairly small lots. The cost per lot was not that significant. So they gave us a budget. They said, you know, we'll do this, but you have to do it for the budget that we had previously set for the old style landscaping. With their model, so it was a little bit more, it was $10,000 a home. We put compost, and it's a requirement at Sunbridge that all homes have to be incorporated with compost.
Yeah, Grim, go ahead.
3 questions. This might be associated with your research. In these projects, there's a good bit of impervious substrate. So I was wondering, if you were measuring temperature, air temperature and ground temperature, and changes with other relative vegetated habitats, where the water's going from those impervious substrates, and plant succession, what's happening over time with these plant communities.
Those are fabulous research questions, and Patrick Bolin and Pierce Jones are leading the research, and Basil Ioni. I don't know how far they've considered those specific questions, but I will try to retain them and bring them back to them.
Back there? Go ahead, yes.
Utilities, you didn't talk much about utilities. I assume that the Sunbridge will be underground, power, everything will be underground?
Yeah, to the homes, yeah.
So when you do the landscape design, you have to take that
You do, yeah, for mostly tree placement.
Okay. Right with tree regulation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The maintenance issue seems to be a really problematic one. So for example, on your turf swap study where you put in the sunshine mimosa and the perennial peanut, how are you keeping down the weeds?
We're fortunate to be doing the maintenance for the model homes right now, so we're doing it ourselves. We're doing a lot of research for selective herbicides over the top that will work for the ground covers. We found some great ones for mimosa, so we can deal with sedge and other weeds with selectives if we need. But really, you just got to stay on top of it. At the beginning, we planted 1 gallons, 12 inches on center, and we used mulch fines. But there, I mean, there's no magic bullet. You have to just pull them and.
What? You just can't get the yard crews to do it.
Yeah, the yard crews can't do it, or won't do it because they don't have time, right? They're driven to mow. This is what they're taught to do, and you have to change the whole model. It's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs who want to start up horticultural-based companies to create more value-added jobs, higher-paying jobs with people that will be more meaningful. You teach them a little bit about horticulture, you get them out of the field, and you give them a bucket, and you tell them to pull the weeds and to learn about the plants and the process, and you can build a business around that.
But I've dealt with people that have, we've talked into doing just this, to, put in something like sunshine mimosa, and it's great for the insects and all of that wonderful stuff, but then their yard crews don't maintain it.
Yeah.
It starts looking like crap, and they hate it.
I'm not convinced that it's going to work. To be honest, the sunshine mimosa in the median mentioned is a really tough environment. The ground covers we have don't quite, check all the boxes, but we'll see. I think we're going to iterate on that part.
Kind of going along with what she's just said, your collaboration or your funding from the Nature Conservancy for your 2-year pilot study on your comparisons, do you really feel that 2 years is adequate for getting?
I think it's a good start. We'll probably have the opportunity to extend the research with the second round of funding based on the initial results.
I worry about the native plants, their establishment period, the work that goes into that period, and then going through the 2 years. And if the, let's say, homeowners are going to be satisfied as time moves on with the amount of work it takes and for how the habitat, will say, changes because it's so dynamic.
It's dynamic,
yeah.
We will see. Right now we've been maintaining for 9 months, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It really doesn't take a lot of time.
You're going to be saving a lot of water too. 44% of your drinking water is going into on landscapes. It goes to 88% in the summer, and so that's some money that you could put on to pulling weeds. Yeah.
I have maybe a silly question, really isn't. I have 2 compost bins, but that wouldn't cover my yard, and it takes a while. So where do you get compost?
We're working with a company called Life Soils, which has a process. It's called the MSAP process for composting. So it's a very good product that is not readily available, although they're getting it out there. It's available for large-scale ag and construction. But you can get different forms of compost from garden stores. Maybe there are local composters. We're actually going to be working with Lysols to bring a composting facility, hopefully, to Indian River County. But yes, good compost. Not all compost is the same, but there is really good compost.
You can do your own too, right?
So,
Yeah.
the next board association we have been working on was mixed groundwater communities. Again, nature, you never see one specific thing called sunshine mimosa. They were doing mimosa, frog fruit, blue-eyed grass mixes. Have you tried that?
I've done a lot of mimosa and frog fruit mixes, also with twin flower. I 100% agree with you. I never want to plant a monoculture ground cover again. I keep fighting my own team over this. It works because they support each other, the dynamic ecological niches at that micro scale. Anyways, blue-eyed grass is that what you said?
Yeah, it's a low-growing iris that actually mimics St. Augustine grass.
Yeah.
It's the same little flowers.
Great. I'm gonna make a note of that because I want to try more mixes. I think that's going to be the solution to the problem we were kind of touching on earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a question on the policy make. How did you get all the people together? Because in South Florida, you can't get any consensus with the developers like Coulter, Pulte, and they just go, cut everything down and just put in as much as they can to get the money out of it. I mean, it would have been great if you'd happened down in South Florida, but I'm hoping you're going to stem the flow as it moves up from South Florida to Indian River County.
Yeah.
And it's coming across. So how are you working with all the policymakers to get them to get buy-in with the policymakers as well as the developers and the real estate people? That's a big issue, I think. I mean, the other stuff is great, but you got to get buy-in because
The Coulter, incidentally, is the development partner at Deering Park, so we'll be working with Coulter, hopefully in this fashion. But your question about how you get people together, I think what the Outside Collab did differently at first is it really opened a platform for interdisciplinary collaboration. So we were very deliberate about all of our events, all of our efforts were to bring the development community with the local government community, with the nursery community and landscape. We did not want to have a nursery conference. We did not want to have a landscape architecture conference, right? We wanted a conference that brought people together. And there wasn't anybody doing that around this topic, and that was enough. To get enough, all it takes is one or two to create a node, and then we can start doing work. And then that hopefully then becomes an example you can benchmark and go from there.
That's what we're trying to do today, actually. Just bring people together. Any more questions? Yes.
Well, I just wanted to comment that I have in my yard is a variable witchgrass, which is a very low growing, and that would stem a lot of the problems with a lot of the other grasses that are coming in.
Variable witchgrass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might check that out.
And so much knowledge, so just ping me. My email will be available. Any ground covers that you can think of, I will plant them in a trial bed and see what happens. So, yeah, thank you.
That mimosa can sometimes jump around and it can be quite invasive itself.
You got to be ready for something different.
Right. Any other questions out there? Yes.
Is there, from your position, is there room in the development landscape for edibles or for a community garden?
Gotcha. They don't like it because of the liability. Liability.
I think
somebody gets sick and then it's the developer's fault. They're just paranoid. That's the pushback you're going to get. But yes, there's room. We planted down like blueberry. We don't eat berries.
Yeah. John?
The single biggest issue that I have in lake and wetland maintenance, and the single biggest invasive that I deal with is mosquito grass that is all over the soil. It's the single hardest thing for me to control, and the biggest thing that drives up prices is the reduce the localized landscape. And it is so hard to find large-scale landscaping for projects like this, where there's no turf, no grass. This project, if implemented, would also make lake management monumentally cheaper and increase the diversity of species.
This is the systems and ecological systems, right? Because if you get one part right, then you enhance, the other part, and that's where maybe you get the chain reaction.
This solves my biggest issue. This is tens of thousands of dollars per HOA per year that I have to deal with. That is solved by this solution. So not only does this benefit y'all and your garden science and pollinators, it makes your rates a lot easier to manage.
If we do the upland landscaping right, it's going to make the littoral and wetland landscaping more successful. And there are budgets everywhere, but it's all siloed and cut up. So the HOA budget for managing the wetlands is so far removed from the landscape budget for the new home that they don't even know that they're in the same P&L. So what we're trying to do is break the silos, to take the budgets out of the buckets and to show people life cycle costs and systems costs. Because when we think in terms of systems, then we can start to see value where people weren't looking. And if we could bring that to the surface and help people, these are very smart people who are making decisions for developers and for municipalities. And they're not dumb, they're very rational, but we just need to help them see, how to connect these budgets.
Is there, thank you very much. We appreciate your great presentation.